Everyone thinks dating a movie star is the ultimate dream, but let me tell you right now, it is a nightmare wrapped in designer silk. I stood in front of the vanity mirror in the master bath of the Malibu estate and I barely recognized the girl staring back at me. My natural brown curls were gone. They had been bleached into a chemical white platinum blonde that felt brittle to the touch. My skin was pale because Julian did not like me going out in the sun anymore. He said the sun aged people and he needed me to be timeless. I looked like a ghost. I looked like her. I remember exactly how this mess started. It was 6 months ago at that greasy diner on Sunset where I used to work double shifts just to pay rent on a shoebox apartment in the valley. I was tired. My feet were killing me and I smelled like old fry oil and desperation. Then he walked in. Julian Stone. Hollywood's golden boy. The guy every girl in America had a poster of on her wall at some point. He was wearing sunglasses inside, which is usually a total jerk move, but on him it just looked cool. He sat in my section. I walked over with my pot of coffee and my hand was shaking so bad I almost spilled it on his vintage leather jacket. He took off his glasses and looked at me with those intense blue eyes and said he wanted black coffee and a side of conversation. I thought he was messing with me. Guys like that do not talk to girls like me unless they want something quick and dirty, but Julian was different. Or at least I thought he was. He asked me about my life and my dreams and I told him I wanted to be an actress just like every other girl in Los Angeles. He did not laugh. He nodded like he understood the hustle. He left me a $500 tip that day. I almost fainted when I saw the cash on the table. He wrote his number on a napkin and wrote, "Call me if you want to see the real city." My roommate Sarah told me I was crazy if I did not call him. She was screaming and jumping on the bed saying this was my big break. I should have listened to my gut. My gut told me something was off, but my brain was blinded by the flashbulbs and the idea of rent not being a problem anymore. We went on our first date 2 days later. He picked me up in a black convertible that cost more than my parents' house. We went to this super exclusive spot in the hills where they take your phone at the door so nobody can leak photos. It felt like a movie. He held my hand across the table and told me I had a classic beauty. He said I did not look like the plastic girls on Instagram. He said I looked like I belonged in a different era. I took it as a compliment. I had no idea he was already casting me for the role of his twisted life. Things moved way too fast after that. Within a month I had basically moved into his place in Beverly Hills. It was a whirlwind of red carpets and parties and paparazzi chasing us down the street. It was intoxicating. I felt important. For the first time in my life people actually looked at me. But then the comments started. It was subtle at first. We were getting ready for a premiere and I put on this red dress I bought with my own money. I felt hot in it. Julian walked in and frowned. He said red was too aggressive for me. He said I should wear white or silver. He went into his closet and pulled out this vintage silk slip dress that looked like it was from the 90s. I put it on just to make him happy. It fit perfectly, which was kind of weird, but I ignored it. When we got to the event, the photographers went crazy. Julian whispered in my ear that I was the most beautiful woman there, but his grip on my waist was tight. It hurt a little. That night he brushed my hair and told me he loved how soft it was, but he wished it was lighter. He said platinum blonde would make my blue eyes pop. I told him I liked my brown hair, but he just kept stroking it and saying, "Imagine how bright you would shine, Maya. Imagine." 2 weeks later I was in the salon chair with foil on my head, smelling the bleach burn my scalp. When I came home, Julian literally gasped. He had tears in his eyes. He grabbed my face and kissed me harder than he ever had before. He said I was perfect. He started buying me clothes every day. Not new stuff. Vintage stuff. High-waisted jeans and cropped cardigans and slip dresses. I started to feel like I was wearing a costume, but Julian was so happy. He was paying off my student loans and he got my mom a car, so who was I to complain, right? Then the speech lesson started. We were sitting by the pool and I said something about getting some tacos. He made a face. He said I sounded too valley. He said he wanted to help me refine my voice for when I started getting roles. He hired this vocal coach named Mrs. Higgins who was strictly business. She made me practice these old Atlantic accents. She made me talk slower and softer. She made me lower my register. Julian would sit in the corner and watch us. He would not say anything, he would just watch with this intense look on his face like he was studying a science experiment. One night we were watching a movie in his home theater. It was an old one starring his mother Evelyn Vane. She was a legend. She vanished from the public eye 20 years ago and nobody knew why. In the movie she was breathtaking. She had platinum blonde hair and she was wearing a silver slip dress. My stomach dropped. I looked down at myself. I was wearing a silver slip dress. I touched my hair. It was platinum blonde. I looked at the screen and then I looked at Julian. He was not watching the movie. He was watching me. He was mouthing the lines along with her, but he was looking right at me. I felt a chill go down my spine that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. I asked him if he wanted to turn it off. He snapped out of his trance and smiled, but it did not reach his eyes. He said, "No baby, I just love seeing how much you remind me of her talent. You are going to be just as big as she was. I want you to meet her." That was the hook. He told me she was sick and she lived in seclusion at their estate in Malibu. He said he was producing a biopic about her life and he wanted me to play her. He said nobody else could do it. He said I was born for it. Suddenly the hair and the clothes and the voice lessons made sense. He was just method acting. He was preparing me for the role of a lifetime. I felt relieved. I thought I was going crazy thinking he was trying to change me, but he was just being a dedicated producer. I told him yes. I told him I would do anything to make the movie great. We drove to Malibu the next day. The house was more like a fortress. It sat on a cliff overlooking the ocean surrounded by high walls and security cameras. The gates opened slowly and we drove up a long winding driveway. The house was massive and cold. It was all glass and concrete. There were no flowers. No warmth. Just sharp angles and the sound of the ocean crashing against the rocks below. Julian led me inside. The place was silent. We walked down a long hallway lined with posters of Evelyn Vane. Her eyes seemed to follow me. We got to a heavy wooden door at the end of the wing. Julian took a deep breath and unlocked it. Inside the room was dark. The curtains were drawn. It smelled like lavender and stale air. Evelyn Vane was sitting in a wheelchair by the window. She looked frail. Her once legendary beauty was faded and hidden behind wrinkles and sadness. She turned her head slowly when we walked in. When she saw me, her eyes went wide. She made a sound like a whimpered gasp. Julian walked over and kissed her on the forehead. He said, "Mother, I brought someone to see you. This is Maya." Evelyn looked at Julian and then back at me. She was shaking. Her hands were gripping the armrests of her chair so hard her knuckles were white. I walked over and knelt beside her. I used my new soft voice, the one Julian liked. I said, "It is an honor to meet you, Miss Vane." She flinched when I spoke. She looked at my hair and then at my dress. She whispered something I could not hear. I leaned in closer. She whispered it again. "Run." My heart stopped. I looked back at Julian, but he was busy pouring a drink at the wet bar in the corner of the room. He did not hear her. I looked back at Evelyn. Her eyes were pleading. She looked terrified. Not of the world outside, but of him. Of her own son. I tried to play it cool. I stood up and smiled. I told Julian she seemed tired. He nodded and said she has her good days and her bad days. He ushered me out of the room and locked the door behind us. I heard the click of the lock and it sounded like a gunshot in the quiet house. That night I could not sleep. We were staying in the guest wing. Julian was asleep next to me, breathing deeply. I kept thinking about the look in Evelyn's eyes. I kept thinking about the way she flinched. I got out of bed quietly. The floor was cold under my feet. I needed to know what was going on. I crept out into the hallway. The house was dark and full of shadows. I walked towards Evelyn's wing. I do not know what I planned to do. Maybe just talk to her without Julian looming over us. When I got to her door, I tried the handle. It was locked. Of course it was locked. I put my ear to the wood. I could hear something faint inside. It sounded like a movie playing. I heard a voice. It sounded like Evelyn's voice but younger. I frowned. Was she watching her own movies? I walked further down the hall. There was another door slightly ajar. I had not noticed it before. I pushed it open. It was a small room filled with monitors. It was a security room. The screens showed different parts of the house. The kitchen. The living room. The pool. And Evelyn's room. I stepped closer to the screen showing her room. She was not in her wheelchair. She was lying on her bed staring at the ceiling. But that is not what made me sick. What made me sick was the audio coming through the speakers. It was not a movie. It was a recording. It was Julian's voice. He was yelling. The recording was old. I could tell by the static. Julian sounded younger. He was screaming at her. You do not get to leave me. You belong to the screen and you belong to me. You are perfect and you will stay perfect. I covered my mouth to stop myself from screaming. I looked at the other monitors. One of them showed the guest bedroom where I had just been sleeping. The camera was zoomed in on the pillow where my head had been. He was watching me. He was watching everything. I backed out of the room. My legs felt like jelly. I needed to leave. I needed to get out of this house right now. I ran back to the bedroom to grab my phone and my purse. Julian was still asleep. I moved as fast as I could. I grabbed my jeans from the floor. I did not even care about changing out of the silk nightgown. I just needed keys. I found his car keys on the dresser. I grabbed them and turned to the door. Going somewhere, babe? The voice was low and sleepy, but it stopped me dead in my tracks. I turned around. Julian was sitting up in bed. The moonlight was hitting his face. He was not smiling. He looked calm. Too calm. I stammered. I said I just needed some water. I tried to hide the keys behind my back. He stood up. He was naked and unashamed. He walked towards me slowly. He said, "The kitchen is that way, Maya. Why do you have my keys?" I took a step back. I hit the dresser. I said I wanted to go for a drive. I could not sleep. He stopped a few feet away from me. He tilted his head. He looked at my hair. He reached out and touched a strand of it. He said, "You know, I really hate it when you lie to me. It ruins the character." Evelyn never lied. Evelyn was pure. I slapped his hand away. The fear was turning into anger. I said, "I am not Evelyn. I am Maya. And I am leaving." Julian laughed. It was a dry, cold sound. He said, "Maya does not exist anymore." I directed her out of the scene. "You are the star now. You are the second take. And this time we are going to get it right." He lunged at me. I screamed and dodged him. I ran for the door. I made it into the hallway and sprinted towards the stairs. I could hear his heavy footsteps behind me. He was fast. He was athletic. I was slipping on the marble floor in my bare feet. I got to the front door. I fumbled with the locks. There were 3 of them. Why were there 3 locks? My hands were shaking so bad. I got the first one open. Then the second. I felt a hand grab my hair. He yanked me back so hard I fell to the floor. My head hit the tiles. Stars exploded in my vision. He dragged me across the floor by my hair. I was kicking and screaming, scratching at his arms. He did not even flinch. He was strong. Crazy strong. He dragged me past the living room and towards the basement door. I grabbed onto the leg of a heavy table. I held on for dear life. I screamed, "Let me go, you psycho." He stopped pulling. He looked down at me. His face was blank. He said, "Cut." That was not the line. The line is, "I love you, Julian. Let us try it again." He kicked my hand off the table leg. I heard a crack. Pain shot up my arm. I cried out. He hauled me up and threw me over his shoulder like a sack of potatoes. He opened the basement door and carried me down into the dark. The basement was not a basement. It was a set. It was a perfect replica of a 1950s living room. There were bright lights and cameras set up on tripods. There was a makeup chair in the corner. He threw me onto the couch. I scrambled back against the cushions. He stood over me, breathing hard. He smoothed back his hair. He smiled that $1,000,000 smile. He said, "Welcome to the set, darling. We have a lot of work to do. Mom is upstairs waiting for her scene partner, but you need to learn your lines first." I looked around frantically for a weapon. A prop. Anything. There was a heavy glass ashtray on the coffee table. I eyed it. Julian saw me looking. He shook his finger at me. That is not in the script." He walked over to a rack of clothes in the corner. He pulled out a dress. It was identical to the one Evelyn was wearing in the photo in the hallway. He threw it at me. "Put this on. The lighting is all wrong for what you are wearing." I threw the dress back at him. I said, "I am not putting that on. I am going to the police. People will look for me. My roommate knows I am with you." Julian laughed again. He said, "Sarah. Sweet Sarah. I sent her a text from your phone this morning. I told her we were going to Paris for a few months. A romantic getaway. She was so happy for you. She said bon voyage." My blood ran cold. He had thought of everything. He had been planning this since the moment he saw me in that diner. I was never a girlfriend. I was a prop. I was a replacement part for his broken obsession. He took a step towards me. I grabbed the ashtray. I did not think. I just swung. It hit him square in the forehead. He stumbled back. Blood started trickling down his face. He looked surprised. He touched the blood and looked at his fingers. For a second there was silence. Then his face twisted. It was not the handsome movie star face anymore. It was a monster. He roared. It was an animal sound. He charged at me. I scrambled off the couch and ran behind the camera equipment. I pushed a heavy light stand over. It crashed between us. Glass shattered everywhere. It bought me a few seconds. I ran for the stairs. I made it up 3 steps before he grabbed my ankle. I fell hard. My chin hit the concrete step. I tasted blood. He dragged me back down. I kicked him in the face with my free foot. I felt his nose crunch. He let go. I scrambled up the stairs on my hands and knees. I got to the door. I threw it open and burst into the hallway. I needed to get out. But I could not leave Evelyn. If I left, she was trapped here with him. And he was going to kill me if he caught me again. I ran towards Evelyn's wing. I had the keys still clutched in my hand. I must have held on to them when he grabbed me. I prayed one of them unlocked her door. I heard Julian coming up the basement stairs. He was yelling my name. It echoed off the walls. "Maya, do not make me cut the scene. Maya, get back to your mark." I reached Evelyn's door. I jammed the key into the lock. It did not turn. Wrong key. I tried the next one. Wrong key. I could hear him running down the hall. I fumbled with the third key. My hands were slippery with sweat and blood. Come on, come on, come on. The key turned. The lock clicked. I threw the door open and slammed it shut behind me just as Julian slammed his body against it from the other side. I locked it. I leaned against the door breathing like I had just run a marathon. The door shook as he pounded on it. Maya, open this door right now. We are not done filming. I looked at Evelyn. She was awake. She was staring at me with wide, terrified eyes. She saw the blood on my face. She saw the fear. I walked over to her. I knelt down. I said, Evelyn, we have to go. We have to get out of here. She shook her head. She whispered, he will never let us leave. He keeps the gates locked. I held up the keys. I said, I have his keys. I have the car keys and the gate remote is on the ring. We can make it. She looked at the keys. A spark of hope flickered in her dull eyes. She whispered, the garage. There is an elevator behind the bookshelf. It goes straight to the garage. I nodded. I grabbed the handles of her wheelchair. The pounding on the door stopped. Silence. That was worse than the yelling. He was planning something. Or he was going around to the window. I pushed the wheelchair towards the bookshelf Evelyn pointed to. She reached out and pulled a specific book. The Great Gatsby. The shelf clicked and swung open. There was a small service elevator. It was old and dusty. I pushed her inside and hit the button for the garage. The doors closed just as glass shattered across the room. Julian had broken the window. I saw his bleeding face through the gap in the doors just before they sealed shut. He screamed. A sound of pure rage. The elevator descended slowly. Too slowly. I held Evelyn's hand. Her skin was paper thin. She squeezed my hand. She said, you look just like me. I looked at her. I said, no. I am Maya. And we are going to survive this. The elevator dinged. The doors opened. We were in the garage. It was huge. Filled with classic cars. And right in the front was the black convertible. I ran to the driver's side. I helped Evelyn into the passenger seat. She was so light. Like a bird. I jumped in and jammed the key into the ignition. The engine roared to life. I hit the button on the remote for the garage door. It started to roll up slowly. I looked in the rearview mirror. The elevator doors were opening. Julian was there. He was holding a fire axe. He looked like a demon. He saw us. He started sprinting towards the car. The garage door was only halfway up. Not enough room. I looked at Evelyn. She nodded. She said, floor it. I slammed my foot on the gas. The tires screeched. Smoke filled the air. The car shot forward. Julian swung the axe. It smashed into the trunk of the car, but we kept moving. We were speeding towards the half-open door. I ducked. Evelyn ducked. The windshield shattered as the top of the garage door clipped it. Glass rained down on us. But we were out. We were in the driveway. The main gates were ahead. They were closed. I hit the remote button again. Nothing happened. He must have disabled it from the house. I looked in the mirror. Julian was in another car now. A red sports car. He was chasing us. I looked at the gates. They were iron. Heavy. I looked at Evelyn. I said, hold on. I did not slow down. I sped up. We hit the gates going 60 miles an hour. The metal groaned and twisted. The car shuddered violently. The airbags deployed. Dust and white powder everywhere. I coughed. I pushed the airbag away. I looked around. We were through. The gates were smashed open. We were on the road. The car was hissing but the engine was still running. I looked at Evelyn. She was dazed but she nodded. I put the car in gear and drove. I drove fast down the Pacific Coast Highway. I watched the rearview mirror until the sun came up. I never saw the red car. We drove until we ran out of gas in a small town 3 hours away. We walked into a police station. A waitress in a torn silk dress and a movie legend everyone thought was dead. We told them everything. They arrested Julian 2 hours later. He was sitting in his home theater watching his mother's movies. He did not fight. He just asked if the lighting was okay for his mugshot. That was 6 months ago. My hair is brown again. I threw away all the vintage clothes. I work in a library now. It is quiet. No cameras. Sometimes I visit Evelyn. She lives in a nice facility with a garden. She seems happy. But sometimes when I am alone in my apartment I hear a noise and I freeze. I look in the mirror and for a split second I see the platinum blonde hair. I see the ghost. And I remember that life is not a movie. There are no retakes. And some monsters do not wear masks. They just wear really expensive sunglasses.